The shuttle Cathara drifted silently through the endless dark of space, its silver hull glinting faintly in the light of a distant sun. Inside, the air shimmered with quiet excitement. 20 alien students from worlds scattered across the Galactic Accord crowded around a wide observation window, their faces glowing with the reflection of the blue planet below, Earth. To them, it was a legend, a myth told in hushed tones at universities and academies, the planet known across the stars as Deathworld. It was a place said to breed monsters, storms, and creatures so fierce they made war look like sport. Yet it was also home to the strangest, most unpredictable species in the galaxy, humans. Their teacher, Professor Yilvan of the Threx species, stood at the center of the deck. He was tall and slender, his carapace glinting like obsidian, his many eyes reflecting the world below. His mandibles clicked softly as he spoke through the translator field. "Observe carefully," he said, his tone calm but carrying authority. "What you see is a world classified as Deathworld Class 5. That means it is one of the most dangerous environments ever recorded that still sustains intelligent life. Every living thing down there has evolved through constant struggle. Every breath they take is a victory against their own planet." The students murmured among themselves, some skeptical, others fascinated. A scaled reptilian student named Jakar scoffed, his forked tongue flicking. "That cannot be true, Professor. How can a species survive in such a place? The oxygen alone would corrode machinery and metal. Their oceans must be filled with poison." Yilvan's head tilted slightly, his voice patient but firm. "And yet they thrive. They have turned that corrosion into power, that poison into medicine. Humanity's story is not one of peace, but of endurance." Another student, a glowing, jelly-like being from the water world of Saren, pulsed with disbelief. "They are not a spacefaring people like us, surely. Their bodies are weak, their lifespans short. What threat could such creatures pose?" The professor gave a low, clicking laugh. "You mistake weakness for vulnerability. Humans have little natural armor. No claws, no scales. But they have will. They are born into storms, live among predators, and drink water that would kill most of you. When their bodies fail, they build machines to keep moving. When the sky strikes them with lightning, they learn to harness it. You will soon see for yourselves." The Cathara shifted its course, the planet growing larger and brighter beneath them. Through the wide window, the continents of Earth appeared, vast and green and scarred, with clouds swirling like white tempests. The students fell silent, struck by its wild beauty. It was not a world of peace. It looked alive in the most dangerous way possible. As the shuttle descended toward the orbiting human outpost known as Argus Station, Professor Yilvan watched his students carefully. "Remember what you see today," he said softly. "No simulation can prepare you for the reality of humanity. They are not the most advanced race in the galaxy, but they are the most determined. The Accord wishes to understand them, to learn what kind of mind can survive a death world." The station came into view, a ring of steel and lights circling above the blue planet. Human ships, small and battle-worn, drifted nearby like guards standing watch. The students pressed closer to the glass. Some were frightened. Others were curious. One young avian student whispered, "Professor, are they dangerous?" Yilvan's eyes never left the view of Earth. "Only if you mistake kindness for weakness," he said. "The humans are unpredictable. They may welcome you with open hands, or they may defend themselves with fire. Either way, today you will learn why the galaxy calls their home a death world." As the shuttle docked, a quiet tension filled the air. None of the students knew that their lesson was about to turn into something far greater than a classroom visit. The true meaning of Earth's name, Deathworld, was waiting for them just beyond the glass. When the shuttle Cathara finally locked onto the docking ring of Argus Station, the alien students buzzed with excitement. The human outpost looked old and rough, built from steel that bore the scars of fire and time. The walls carried scratches, scorch marks, and dents that spoke of survival, not perfection. Inside, the air smelled faintly of metal and oil. The students followed Professor Yilvan through a long corridor where human workers moved quickly, their faces sharp with focus. They were not tall or graceful like many galactic species, yet there was something steady in the way they carried themselves. Every gesture seemed to have purpose, every movement born from practice and discipline. When they reached the main hall, a human woman stood waiting. She was dressed in a dark uniform, her hair pulled back, her stance confident and calm. Her name badge read Captain Sarah Hale. "Welcome to Earth's orbit," she said, her voice firm but polite. "I'm Captain Hale, commander of this station. Please stay close to your guide, and for your own safety, don't touch anything marked with red warnings. Some of it glows for a reason." Her words were simple, but her tone carried quiet authority. The alien students nodded quickly, trying to appear brave. Hale led them through the station, pointing out control rooms and research labs. The humans were running tests on communication systems, repairing damaged panels and studying data from deep space. The professor asked questions, his translator humming. Hale answered with patience, explaining that Argus Station's purpose was to monitor orbital defenses and assist passing ships. Everything seemed calm. For a moment, the students relaxed, thinking the stories about Earth were just exaggerations. Then the alarms started. A deep, blaring sound echoed through the corridors, flashing red lights painting the walls in warning color. The station shuddered slightly as if struck by something invisible. Captain Hale's calm expression hardened instantly. "Unidentified fleet incoming," a voice crackled over the intercom. 12 ships. No accord signature. They're descending fast. The students froze, staring at one another in confusion. Professor Yilvin's eyes widened, his mandibles trembling. "Pirates?" he asked. "No species would dare attack here." Hale turned sharply toward the control deck. "They're not pirates. They're Vracs." She spat the name like venom. "And they've been getting bolder." The professor followed, his students stumbling after him. Through the wide observation glass, they saw the first shapes emerge from hyperspace. The Vracs fleet was monstrous. 12 black ships with jagged armor, bristling with weapons that glowed red like burning coals. They moved with terrifying speed, spreading out in formation as they began to fire. The first blast hit one of Earth's defense satellites, tearing it apart in a flash of light. Then another shot followed, shaking the station. The students screamed as the hull trembled. "Surely you'll retreat," one cried. "You must flee before they destroy you." Captain Hale glanced back, her face calm but fierce. "Flee? Not today." She barked orders into her headset. "Raise shields! Power the orbital guns! Get those civilians to the bunkers." Her crew responded instantly, moving like one living machine. The aliens watched in disbelief as every human on the deck snapped into action. No one hesitated, no one argued. They had been waiting for this. Through the glass, the students saw small human ships launching from hangars, fighters, corvettes, and drones, all heading straight toward the Vracs fleet. They were outnumbered and smaller in size, yet they flew with unmatched precision, weaving through plasma fire. The sky above Earth turned into a storm of light and fire. The Vracs ships burned red against the darkness while human crafts darted like sparks from a fire pit. Explosions painted the void, and the students could hardly breathe from the sight. Professor Yilvin whispered, "They cannot win." Captain Hale didn't look away from the battle. "Maybe not," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "But losing doesn't mean we stop fighting." The observation deck shuddered again as debris from a destroyed fighter passed close by. One alien student began to cry. Another fainted. But the humans only tightened their grips on their stations and kept working. The lesson had begun. The aliens had come to study humanity and peace, but now they were witnessing something else entirely. The raw, fearless resolve of a people who refused to surrender, even when the universe itself turned against them. The Deathworld was awake and its children were not running. The sound of alarms echoed through every corridor of Argus Station, but the humans moved like clockwork, their faces set and focused. Captain Sarah Hale stood in the center of the command deck, surrounded by glowing screens and crew members who spoke in quick bursts of orders and confirmations. Her voice cut through the noise with calm precision. "Launch squadrons Alpha through Delta. Bring the rail cannons online. Prepare for counterfire." Around her, officers worked with a strange mixture of fear and determination, not panic. The alien student stood near the wall, wide-eyed and trembling, unable to understand how these fragile-looking creatures faced destruction without losing control. Outside the station, space was alive with chaos. The Vracs fleet moved in tight formation, their crimson weapons flaring like suns. The human defense ships, small and scarred from past battles, raced forward in a swarm, darting between blasts that could vaporize them in seconds. The aliens pressed closer to the glass, watching with disbelief. Every human pilot seemed to dance with death, their movements reckless yet perfectly timed. They didn't fight with size or numbers. They fought with instinct. Lieutenant Ortiz, Hale's second-in-command, grinned despite the tension. He noticed the alien student staring in shock and said, "You came to study humans, right? Well, class is in session." His humor was grim, but his eyes burned with pride. He turned back to his console, guiding the defense systems as enemy torpedoes streaked toward them. A massive explosion rocked the station as a Vrax blast struck one of the orbital guns. The shockwave made several students scream, and even Professor Yilvin had to steady himself. Hale grabbed the edge of a console but didn't flinch. "Status," she barked. "Section 5 hit. Minor breach but holding," Ortiz shouted back. "Good, keep firing." The aliens could not believe it. One of the students, a young crystalline being from a peaceful moon, cried out, "You cannot win. Their weapons are stronger, their ships are larger." Hale glanced over her shoulder, her face streaked with light from the control panels. "Maybe," she said evenly, "but we're smarter. We adapt faster, and we don't stop until it's over." As if to prove her words, a human corvette, small, damaged, and burning, broke formation. Its engines flared as it accelerated straight toward a Vrax destroyer. The aliens gasped in horror. "They are fleeing!" one shouted, but the corvette didn't flee. It rammed the destroyer head-on, its reactor going critical. The explosion lit up the sky like a dying star. Both ships vanished in a storm of fire. The observation deck went silent. Even the humans stopped for a heartbeat, honoring the sacrifice. Hale lowered her head slightly, her voice quiet but proud. "They knew the risk when they signed up," she said. "That's the human way." Professor Yilvin turned toward her, his voice shaking. "You send your young to die so easily?" Hale met his gaze with steady eyes. "No," she said softly. "We send them to protect everyone else." Outside, the battle raged on. Human ships shifted tactics again and again, never fighting the same way twice. They used asteroids for cover, flew through plasma fields, and lured the enemy into the planet's gravity well where targeting became harder. Every loss was turned into an opportunity, every weakness into a trap. The students watched, their fear slowly turning into awe. They began to understand what the professor had meant. Humans didn't rely on strength or perfection. They relied on stubbornness, courage, and the strange fire in their hearts that made them keep fighting, even when the odds were impossible. The lights flickered as another shockwave hit the station. Hale didn't slow down. She turned to Ortiz and said, "Tell the ground teams to prep the surface defenses. If they break through the line, we'll take the fight home." The alien student stared at her, realizing she meant it literally. She would fight on her planet if she had to. There was no surrender in her voice, no hesitation in her eyes. Outside the window, the earth loomed large and blue beneath them, silent and steady. To the students, it now looked less like a world and more like a weapon forged by nature itself, a place that created warriors not because they wanted to fight, but because survival demanded it. And as the Vrax fleet pushed harder, Captain Hale stood tall on the command deck, calm and unbroken, the embodiment of her world's unyielding spirit. The battle over Earth had turned into a storm of light and fire. The human fleet was smaller and badly damaged, yet it refused to fall back. Every time a ship was destroyed, another moved to cover the gap. From the observation deck of Argus Station, the alien students watched the chaos in stunned silence. They had studied wars before, but never had they seen anything like this. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought like a living storm, wild, clever, and fearless. Each human pilot moved as if guided by instinct, not fear. They didn't just fight the enemy. They fought the impossible. Captain Hale stood at the command deck, her uniform scorched, her voice calm despite the destruction outside. "Status," she demanded. "Shields down to 30%, Ortiz replied. "Ammo running low. We can't take another wave like that." "Then we won't," Hale said, her eyes narrowing. She turned to the alien visitors who huddled near the rear wall. "Stay close and don't panic." The aliens were terrified. Professor Yilvin's claws clicked nervously as he asked, "You will retreat now, yes? There is no logic in continuing this fight." Hale gave a faint smile that carried no humor. "There is nowhere safer than Earth," she said. "And you're about to see why." She keyed a long sequence into her command console. Deep beneath the surface of the planet, far below oceans and mountains, systems that had slept for decades began to awaken. Old code flickered alive. The Earth itself began to prepare for war. From orbit, strange flashes of light shimmered across the continents. At first, the aliens thought it was lightning, but then they saw the patterns. Precise, coordinated, almost intelligent. One of the students asked fearfully, "What are they doing?" Lieutenant Ortiz turned with a grin. "Something we call the Deathworld welcome." A few moments later, the first wave of electromagnetic pulses erupted high in Earth's atmosphere. Massive explosions of light spread across the sky, invisible shock waves crackling through space. Every Vrak ship caught in the storm flickered as their systems shorted out. Alarms blared through their comms, lights dimmed, and their engines failed. Their sensors went blind. Their weapons shut down mid-fire. The alien students gasped as one of the enemy cruisers spun out of control and collided with another, both bursting into flame. "How?" a student whispered. Hale answered without turning from her screen. "They thought they were fighting humans. They forgot they were fighting our planet too." As the Vrak ships scrambled to recover, the next phase began. From deep beneath Earth's crust, enormous railguns, massive cannons buried inside mountains and hidden across continents, came to life. Their rounds were simple metal rods, but each one carried enough force to tear through armor like paper. The ground itself seemed to roar as they fired, launching tungsten slugs at near light speed straight into orbit. The alien students clung to the walls as the entire station vibrated. Through the observation window, they saw lines of molten light cut through the void. Vrak ships exploded one after another, some vaporized instantly, others breaking apart and tumbling into the atmosphere below. Professor Yilvin could hardly speak. "You weaponized your own world," he whispered. Hale turned to face him, her expression calm but fierce. "No," she said. "We learned from it. We live on a planet that tries to kill us every day. You learn a few tricks after a few million years." More explosions lit up the horizon. The Vrak's fleet, now half blind and scattered, tried to regroup, but every maneuver brought new danger. Magnetic storms scrambled their navigation. Fragments of their own wreckage became deadly debris fields. Earth's gravity pulled down crippled ships like a predator catching its prey. Within minutes, the advantage had shifted. What looked like certain defeat became a brutal counterattack. The alien students watched in awe as human commanders coordinated with frightening efficiency, using not just their weapons but their environment, their planet, their weather. When the sky finally dimmed and the last Vrak ship broke formation to flee, silence filled the command deck. Smoke hung in the air, and the hum of damaged systems echoed faintly. Captain Hale exhaled slowly, her voice steady. "Status report. Enemy fleet retreating," Ortiz said. "They're running for hyperspace." Hale nodded. "Let them go. They'll remember this lesson." The alien students stood in stunned silence. They had come to study human culture and ended up witnessing a world defend itself like a living organism. They finally understood why the galaxy called Earth a death world. It was not because it killed, it was because it endured. It fought back with everything it had, and the humans who lived there were its fiercest weapon. The sky above Earth was burning. Pieces of broken ships fell like fiery stars, and the air around Argus Station trembled from the force of the explosions. Though the Vrak's fleet had suffered heavy losses, their flagship, the largest of their warships, was still moving. It descended into low orbit, dark and massive, its weapons glowing red as it unleashed another wave of destruction. The orbital defense guns tried to return fire, but they were already damaged. One final blast struck Argus Station, ripping through its outer shell. The deck shook violently, alarms howled, and the lights flickered out. The alien students screamed as the floor tilted beneath them. The shuttle Cathara was hit by debris and began to spin out of control. Captain Hale slammed her hand on the emergency controls, forcing the shuttle's thrusters to stabilize before it broke apart completely. The next second, everything went dark. When the smoke cleared, the shuttle was lying half buried in a valley on Earth's surface. The sky was red from the fires of battle. The alien students stumbled out coughing, their bodies shaking with fear. Professor Yilvin was the first to recover his voice. "We must call for rescue," he cried. "We cannot stay here." But the communication panels were dead, and the hum of power was gone. The crash had cut them off from orbit. Above them, streaks of fire marked where Vrak's landing ships were entering the atmosphere. They were coming. Captain Hale climbed out of the wreck, her uniform torn, her face streaked with dirt and blood. She looked at the burning horizon and knew what was coming next. "They're deploying ground troops," she said, loading a fresh charge into her plasma rifle. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were hard. "We'll hold this ridge. Everyone stay low and move only when I say." The aliens huddled together, terrified. The Vrak soldiers landed soon after. towering armored creatures with black scales and glowing red eyes. Their weapons hissed with energy as they began to spread across the valley. Hale crouched behind a piece of wreckage, scanning their positions through the rifle's scope. She spoke quietly to Ylvin. "When I fire, we move toward those rocks. You keep your students behind cover." The professor looked at her, shaking. "You cannot face them alone," he said. Hale gave a small, tired smile. "I won't be alone. I have you. Now stay behind me." When the first group of Vrak soldiers appeared, Hale opened fire. Her shots were precise and deadly, hitting each target before they could even react. The aliens watched in stunned silence as she moved through the smoke, calm and sharp like a storm given form. The ground shook with every blast, the air filled with dust and heat. A Vrak's plasma bolt struck near her, throwing her off balance, but she rolled behind a rock and returned fire instantly. She was a blur of motion, relentless and unbroken. The alien students could barely breathe. They had never seen such courage. Ylvin crawled beside her as the enemy regrouped. "How can you still stand?" he asked, his voice breaking. Hale reloaded, her hands steady despite the blood dripping from her arm. "Because that's what we do on a Deathworld," she said. "We adapt, we survive, and when we can't run, we fight." She pointed to a ridge in the distance where the Vraks were gathering. "They've set up a beacon there. If it calls reinforcements, we're finished. We need to take it out." The professor hesitated. "How?" Hale reached into her belt pouch and pulled out a small detonator, its light blinking red. "Old Earth trick," she said. "There are munitions buried under this valley from the last war. I can trigger them remotely, but someone has to draw their fire." Before anyone could argue, she stood and ran straight toward the enemy camp, her rifle blazing. The aliens shouted after her, but she didn't stop. Her figure disappeared into smoke and chaos, moving with fierce determination. Plasma fire rained around her, yet she kept going, weaving through wreckage and flame. From their hiding place, Ylvin watched, his claws trembling. Then Hale's voice came through the static of the comlink, faint but clear. "Now, Professor, press the button." He didn't hesitate. He pressed it. For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then the entire valley erupted. The ground split apart and a wave of fire roared into the sky. The blast consumed the Vrak's troops and their beacon, lighting the clouds with burning gold. The shockwave knocked the students to the ground, heat washing over them like the breath of a god. When the light faded, the ridge where the enemy had stood was gone. Nothing left but smoke and silence. The students looked toward the battlefield, searching for the human woman, but all they saw was the burning horizon and the faint echo of her words in their minds. On that day, they understood the lesson completely. This was the strength of humanity, not in their weapons or their technology, but in their will to fight even when there was no hope. On a world built to kill them, they had learned to live, and that was something no enemy could ever destroy. When the fire finally faded, the valley lay silent under a sky still glowing red from battle. Smoke drifted in long ribbons across the broken land, and the air smelled of dust, metal, and rain. The alien students rose slowly from behind the rocks, their bodies trembling, their faces pale with shock. Where moments ago the Vrak's army had stood, there was now only ruin. The mountainside was scorched black, and the ground still pulsed with heat. The explosion had destroyed everything: the enemy troops, their landing crafts, and the beacon that had threatened to call reinforcements. For a long time, no one spoke. Even the wind seemed afraid to break the silence. Professor Ylvin moved first, stepping carefully through the ash. His claws trembled as he looked across the valley. "Captain Hale?" he called, his voice unsteady.
"Captain?"
There was no answer, only the faint crackle of fires burning in the distance. He feared the worst. The human woman who had fought like a storm might have vanished with the blast she had created. His eyes dimmed with sorrow. Around him, the students lowered their heads, mourning someone they had known for only a short time, but who had changed everything they believed about humans. Then a voice came from the smoke. "You're still here?" It was tired and rough, but unmistakably human. They turned as a figure stepped through the haze. It was Captain Hale, her uniform torn, her arm bandaged with a strip of fabric, her face streaked with soot. She limped slightly but was alive. The students gasped, and even Ylvin felt his chest tighten with relief. Hale gave them a weary smile. "Good," she said softly. "We held the line." The students rushed to her, speaking over each other, full of questions and awe. She raised a hand to quiet them. "Save your breath. The fight's not over until the sky is clear." She looked upward, where the last of the Vrak ships were breaking formation. The orbital defenses, though damaged, were still firing. Moments later, the largest enemy ship turned sharply and retreated into the black, followed by the others. The Vrak's fleet was retreating, beaten and humiliated. Hale exhaled slowly, her eyes on the stars. "They won't be back soon," she said, "but they'll remember this day." The alien student stood beside her, watching the burning trails fade into the distance. They were silent, each of them feeling a deep and unfamiliar emotion, a mixture of respect, fear, and wonder. These humans who lived on a planet that should have killed them had once again done the impossible. They had faced a far stronger enemy and survived. Not through superior weapons, not through numbers, but through courage and defiance. Rescue ships arrived a few hours later, their lights cutting through the smoke. Medics rushed out to help the wounded, both human and alien. The survivors of Argus Station were brought down to the surface, where they began to rebuild. Even as they worked among the wreckage, there was laughter and determination in their voices. The aliens could not understand how anyone could find joy in such destruction, but Hale only smiled when Yilvan asked. "Because we're still alive," she said, "and that's reason enough." When the time came for the Cathara to leave, the students boarded the shuttle quietly. The earth below them looked scarred, but its ocean still shimmered blue, and its clouds still glowed white under the sun. It was wounded but alive, just like its people. Professor Yilvan stood by the window, staring at the world that had challenged everything he knew. "I understand now," he said softly to his students. "I understand why they call it the Deathworld." The youngest of them, still shaken, asked, "Because it kills all who come?" Yilvan shook his head. "No," he said, "because everything on that planet fights to live no matter what it costs, and from that struggle came a species that learned to stand even when the universe tries to break them." They all turned their eyes toward the planet one last time. The blue world hung against the dark, scarred but shining, beautiful and terrible all at once. The students knew they would never forget what they had seen. They had come to learn about humans, but what they discovered was far greater. Humanity was not powerful because of its weapons or technology, but because of its will to survive and protect. As the shuttle moved away from orbit, Captain Hale's voice came through the comms, faint but steady. "Safe travels," she said. "And remember, never mistake kindness for weakness." The words hung in their minds long after the signal faded. For the first time, the alien students truly understood why Earth was called a death world. It was not a warning of danger. It was a mark of respect for the fiercest survivors in the galaxy.